And so I titled this talk, Practice at the End of the Age. Is anybody here just because of that title? Okay, just checking. It occurred to me, there's a story from the early days of Minnesota Zen Center in which they were trying to raise money for something or other. So they had this big fancy fundraiser and invited lots of rich people. I don't know where they found them, but anyway, they did. And they had wine and cheese, and it was really cool. And then Katagiri Roshi came in to give a talk. And he started his talk by saying, everybody dies. I don't know what else he said, but I hear that they did not get a dime. So here I am. So some people were here yesterday, and I talked about Dogen's vow. Now, Dogen thought that he was in the age of decline. Buddhism traditionally had 3 ages, and then the 4th one way later. But so there was the age of true Dharma, which is when Buddha lived, and a while after that. And there was true enlightenment, true practice, and true teaching. And then there was the age, I forget what it's called, but there was not enlightenment anymore, but there was still real practice and real teaching. And then there was the age of decline, in which there was no real practice, no enlightenment, but there was still teaching. And this one is supposed to last for 8,000 years until Maitreya comes. This is kind of depressing. In Japan, 2 whole schools of Buddhism formed around that concept. And one of them chanted the name of Amitabha to get into heaven. And they asked Amitabha for help because they couldn't do it themselves because they were in the age of decline. And the other one chanted the Lotus Sutra to make useful things happen. And they're still with us. Well, they both still exist. They're both lovely groups. And meanwhile, Dogen goes, Buddhas and ancestors are the same as we. We in the future shall be Buddhas and ancestors. Before Buddhas were enlightened, they were the same as we, and stuff like that. So Buddha just goes all out into defiance of this age of decline. Not that he denies the age is happening, but he denies that we are stuck. Does anybody feel like we're in the age of decline right now? Oh, I was thinking of a show of hands, but I got some facial expressions. Yeah, okay. So I am not going to talk about all the depressing things that make us feel that way. We know about them. So Buddhism has an awareness of death. That's why Katagiri Roshi did what he did. We understand that everything changes and that everything ends and that everyone dies. In fact, someone asked Suzuki Roshi to summarize Buddhism in 2 words. They thought he couldn't do it. He said, everything changes. So everything comes to an end, and it's not generally comfortable when it comes to an end. And a lot of Buddhists are involved in hospice work or in chaplaincy or in various things, helping people deal with the reality of death. It's also true that things, aspects of our life come to an end. My first grandchild is in college. My last grandchild is no longer little. My retirement came to an end. I went back to work. I did not like that. Ideas come to an end. Cultures and civilizations come to an end. Jared Diamond wrote a book, Collapse, about the end of cultures and civilizations. And noted the impact of environmental issues in those ends. And also noted some civilizations that managed to make changes so that although their way of life changed, they the human beings continued. So my thought is, are we at the end of an age? It's not, no, it's not, like, I'm not going to explore that question. That's not a question for this setting. The question is, what if it is? What if it is? What if humans go extinct within 50 years? What if the way of life that we know ends? More likely 5 or 10 years. What if those Midwestern droughts and floods that wrecked the crops, what if we see widespread starvation? We're not used to that here. Other places are already seeing it. Or what if every country in the world has a fascist dictator? There have been some pretty scary ones lately. And the only one we can do anything about is this one, who I'm not calling him a fascist dictator. He's just scary. How do we practice in a time like this? And as I asked that question and I didn't know the answer, some people and places came to mind. Vietnam came to mind. A lot of people here were adults or young adults during the Vietnam War. And we remember stories of what Buddhists and serious practitioners did during that time. And Thich Nhat Hanh was doing like social work stuff. And some of his friends got killed, murdered by the establishment. His teacher set himself on fire, which actually, we didn't know it, but it's an old Buddhist thing. You make yourself a living offering. I just don't like to think about it. And then many others did, and that became a thing that people did who were desperate, including at the beginning of the Arab Spring. Some guy, presumably with no Buddhist context at all, had this. Things are so bad, there's nothing to do except send a message. And he set himself on fire and died and sent a message and started something that a lot of us had hopes for. So when you think of sincere practice in a situation that seems impossible, what do you do? And again, there are personal things that seem impossible, and there are lots of stories about those. A woman that I knew, she was my practice leader for a while when I was at San Francisco Zen Center. And I found out by reading a book, of which the last copy has been bought, Zen Practice in Challenging Times. And she wrote about getting hit by a car and having her body wrecked and being disabled and in extreme pain. And she was slowly working her way to recovery. And then she had another accident. I don't know if it was another car or what. And she wrote about what it was like. It's like, chronic pain is the thing that scares me worse than anything. Apparently she's teaching again. I don't know how her body is. I've known of some teachers there who lived with bodies that didn't work and taught with bodies that didn't work, and they gave something special to the people around them and to their students. So, and you have impossible circumstances like various wars, various kinds of dictatorships. See, Buddhists are not currently a target anywhere that I can think of, but Muslims are. What's it like to be Muslim when when the Buddhist leader of your country is rounding up Muslims, imprisoning them, sending them to camps. Oof. Well, it's horrifying. Anyway, that's the religion that is having impossible circumstances these days. So, how do we practice? And I'm going to throw out some things, and I'm going to tell some stories. The stories are the best part. A little bit more from a Dogen. Dogen is the founder of Shodo Zen. He says, confessing and repenting in this way, one never fails to receive profound help from all Buddhas and ancestors. Confessing, no denial. No trying to pretend that things are okay when they're not okay. No false hopes. No, somebody's going to fix it. Do you know there are people who think that aliens from other planets are going to come and save us? I know this because I have an old friend who thinks there are aliens, but she thinks it's really stupid to count on them to save us. It's like, why would, or technology will save us, or any of that. It's not happening. So not denying. Repenting means to turn back and to come home. And so I think that's step one. Well, maybe admitting it is step one. And maybe step two is returning to proper relationship with the earth around us. We start with humans. Probably I don't need to go too far talking about humans. That's going to be there. But our relationship with the rest of the living earth. We live in a culture that says we're the masters. Sometimes only some of us are the masters. And sometimes all of us are the masters, but everything else is there for resources, and it's fine to use it. And of course, GDP is a measure of how much we've used it and how much we've converted the living earth into things like cash or property, televisions and cars and houses and things. So coming from there, it's sort of like the best you get is, well, if we kill off the earth, we'll die too. And that is not really home. That is still, well, we're tenants and they're landlords and we will cheat them as much as we can. It's also not the natural way that human beings feel, I think. If you go anywhere to indigenous people, they understand that there's a connection. They understand that other beings, at least other animals, are sentient, are conscious, have lives and wills. Not that they're identical to humans, but that they're people. And indigenous people and now scientists are observing the sentience of trees, forests, mushrooms, fungi, various plants. I mean, years ago, somebody did the hidden life of plants. So this knowledge is around us, but it's not accepted, and it's becoming a little more visible, partly because people are, in fact, starting to get the way we've been living is disastrous, starting to listen to indigenous people. If I go back 10 years in my mind and think of, people paying attention to indigenous wisdom, we have moved a long way. At least in the environmental movement. In Minnesota, we're fighting a pipeline and some other stuff. And the interfaith organization that works on this, and the Minnesota 350 organization. They both regularly organize events in which the leadership is indigenous and make sure that those of us who stole the land or who are living on stolen land and benefiting from the theft are not taking more from the people from whom we stole it, but are listening to what they know that our ancestors didn't know. And so we're you might say we're taking wisdom, but anyway, the sense of respect is really strong. Story. There's these people called the Kogi in Colombia. Probably 500 years ago, when the outsiders came from Europe and started building cities and so forth, they withdrew into the jungle, up a mountain, and continued their traditional way of life. They didn't let people in, and they had shamanic practices, and they had various traditional practices, and they were still in touch. And they, their teachings say that they are responsible for the well-being of the earth. And in 1991, or perhaps a little before that, they got worried and they decided they had to send a message. And so they invited the BBC to come in and do a documentary, which I have watched. And then 20 years later, they went, you know, this isn't good enough. And they invited the filmmaker who had done the BBC documentary, who was retired. And he came, and, you know, they all went to London. I don't know who funded this, but I'm sure it wasn't them, because they don't have money. They call themselves Elder Brother. They call us Younger Brother, and they're trying to send a message to Younger Brother. And they see things like the earth is getting sick and dying because of mining gold, and because of grave robbers digging up the gold things that they buried, you know, that were buried with people. They actually plant gold in places in the earth to protect the earth. And they say gold is the blood of the earth. It's associated with the fertility of the earth. You drain the blood, you get no fertility. And it's interesting that some of the things they say in the second film, they have scientists and they confirm exactly. It's like they've got the science down completely. They're illiterate, but they know how the natural world works. And we have a quotation. I think this is Charles Eisenstein, but I didn't write it down. Okay. So this means asking, what does the land want? What does the river want? What does the planet want? Which means you acknowledge that that thing, being, has consciousness. And for the Kogi, matter is not a container for thought. Matter is thought made manifest. It's the thought of the mother. So matter is thought. Reminds me of matter is energy. So what did so I'm skipping around. Get back here. Okay. So, oh dear. Yeah, human nature is to live in a place forever and just improve it. There's a forest in Wisconsin that, I'm going to say the Chippewa tribe, but I'm not sure. They've taken care of it for hundreds of years. They do log it, and it's better than it was when they started. Human nature is not what people are telling us. Human nature is not about sin and separation. Separation is delusion. Sin is separation, by the way, as far as I can tell. And so the original sin is separation from the family. And is it separation from God? Well, that depends what you think God is. To me, they're pretty identical. Human nature. There is an insistence that human nature is bad. Have people heard of the Christmas truce, World War I, 1914? Some people have. So I was listening to a documentary about it, and they were interviewing the man who wrote the song about it. And he spoke about going and singing in nursing homes in Germany. And there were just a few soldiers left who had been there. And those soldiers said, "Nobody believes us. Thank you for believing us." It is not permitted to believe that somebody started singing a Christmas carol. That's how that started. And then people all across the line started singing with them. And the next day they played soccer, and it went on for days. And if I heard it right, they actually had to withdraw those people. I mean, the powers that be decided that they had to get the war going again, but they had to pull back the people who had participated. And even when they ended it, the commanders, the frontline commanders, went and exchanged gifts and spoke to each other. It's like, and that's only 100 years ago. That's what human beings are like. You have to make them hurt each other. You have to make them kill. And we know how they do that to children in wars. They kill another kid in front of them. Well, you have a child soldier. So now I think I've done 2 or 3 first steps. And I wrote here, I propose the first step is to return to that relationship, to find our way back to how we live with the earth and with each other in kindness. From the Metta Sutta, even as a mother watches over and protects her only child, so with a boundless mind should one cherish all living things, suffusing love over the entire world, above, below, and all around, without limit. That's our side of it. And the other side of it is we are created, we are lived. Our life comes from those beings around us. That's called interdependent co-origination. That's the official Buddhist term for it. Everything gives us life, moment by moment. Okay. There's a beautiful thing here that I'm going to save for later, because I want to go to the second step, which I would say clarifying your intention. Before you go to a retreat or start a practice period or enter a monastery in Japan or at San Francisco Zen Center, they would do it. And it was like sit for a day or sit for 5 or 10 days facing the wall, and you don't do anything. They bring you food. And fortunately, you can get up and use the restroom as often as you want to because you really need to stretch your knees. And they call that clarifying your intention. And I remember a person who came to Tassajara, and somewhere during that 5 days, he decided that this wasn't the right time, and he left. And he came back, I don't know, a year later, sometime later, and they said, "You've already done it. You don't have to do it again." He said, "I want to do it again." So clarifying our intention and not having 5 days to sit, I have a list of questions. These questions are from Derek Jensen, who is controversial, and I just really like these questions. And I'm going to ask them slowly. What do you love? It's not ice cream. What do you really, really love? What are your gifts? What is the largest, most pressing problem that you can help to solve using the gifts that are unique to you in all the universe? What does your land base need to survive?
Your what?
Land base. It's like, if you had trouble with question 3, that's a helper. What does your land base need to survive? And the last question is, are you going to do it? And so that is, I'm not going to try to stop with these right now. I thought, oh, we could have a discussion. No, too big. So I'm going to, so since I called that the second step, I'm going to call the third step, trust the way, trust that you are in the way. These are words from Dogen. And along with that, ask what to do. So trusting is a big deal. And that was, I think, a lot of what I talked about yesterday. It's like, no, I'm not some worthless piece of whatever. I am a human. I am conscious. Life is flowing to me at all moments. I'm a channel for the powers of life. And all my habits of shame, guilt, and whatever are harmful habits. And I mentioned asking what to do. Now, okay, so I have a couple of stories about trust. In 2015, I had bought this farm, this 17 acres of beautiful land, a year earlier. And the people across the road broke their place up into 2 parts to sell. And somebody snatched the house right away. And the land, somebody put an offer on the land contingent on being able to build a house on the little chunk of that property that was on my side of the road, the riverside, which most of which is in wild and scenic, which has lots and lots of restrictions, and you cannot build, you know. I can't build another house on my place. But, so I talked to the county people, I talked to whoever I could find, and they said, there's nothing you can do, they don't need a hearing. And to visualize, so I so-called own 8 acres of this hill and woods. And then there's some state land right by the river. And then there's 25 acres that way. But about 6 acres were in this piece where they wanted to build. And it's right up against mine. I've got an altar right on the north edge of my property. And it's beautiful. It's a sacred space. And what I could see was another modern suburban home plonked right, I could see where the only place to possibly build would be. And it was very close to the property line. And I was like, if they build, I really am going to move. Because they will have ruined, they will have desecrated the place. And I could not find any tangible things to do. And somebody said, well, go ask the trees for help. I was in the custom of sitting 5-day sessions at the time, and on the 5th day in the afternoon, I put on my hiking boots and went outside and walked on the paths and through the woods asking for help. I started to feel responses. I don't know if I heard them. I don't hear words much, and I don't see pictures much. But I could feel that something was coming back to me. And I could even feel, you don't have buckthorn here, but you have other invasive plants. I could even feel the buckthorn answering. And buckthorn are like the enemy.
Like kudzu here.
Like kudzu, yeah. Not quite as vigorous, but pretty bad. They even answered me. And so I walked for some hours, and then I went back home, and I felt a little better. And that was all I knew. And I waited. And a house was not built. And a couple years later, I looked online for property ownership and stuff like that. And what I observed was, not only was there no house there, but the zoning had changed. That piece of property was no longer part of the place with 4 building spots on the other side of the road. It was part of the 25 acres on my side of the road, which is in the wild and scenic area, and you can't build on it. And I went, ah. And I think that was the beginning of me getting really serious about the ability of non-sentient beings to do stuff. So I know I named the Mountains and Waters Alliance after that happened. Okay, second story, Interfaith Power and Light. That's the Minnesota organization that I mentioned. And they're working on a lot of stuff, but one of the things, there's a pipeline known as Line 3, which is the big pipeline disastrous issue going on right now. And I'm going to assume that you know something about pipelines. And there's a indigenous-led organization called Honor the Earth that works up there. Well, so Interfaith Power and Light organized a prayer ceremony in front of the governor's office. That just happened to be the day before the governor had to make a decision about Line 3. And I found the quotation. It says, Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan have fully committed to a Department of Commerce appeal of the Line 3 pipeline decision. In other words, they did what we wanted them to do. So Honor the Earth is now asking Interfaith Power and Light to go and do another prayer vigil. Because of course there's more stuff to do, and you know what? I'm going. I would have been at the other one, but something. So my response, my personal response to this question is, I am going to ask for help from the other beings. As I recall, I asked, when I walked on the hill, I asked it to protect itself. Because everything we do, if we cut down trees, if we build a house, you know, we're damaging the earth. Usually we don't ask. Sometimes people do ask, and the proposal from a lot of people, including the Kogi people, is ask. And I'm just working on it. It's like, okay, so the next time I go and pull up buckthorn, I'm going to have to ask permission from each plant. And then I have to figure out what they said. But I actually have more confidence in this than I have in all my permaculture training and in any of the other options. I'm certainly not going to poison them. I had some other stuff, but I don't, it feels like time to stop. I am just going to, okay, I'm going to mention the 4 foundations, which are compassion, loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. People can ask me about them if you want to. And then I'm going to read this poem by Mary Oliver and then offer space. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. So, comments or questions? And we'll breathe.
Maybe repeat the 4 foundations?
Yes. Compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, and sympathetic joy. You're welcome. We don't have to talk. Yes.
This is so in concert with the way I see the world, that it's like a living, breathing thing that we're sort of like bacteria on. And so I love that way of understanding that, and then it feels not as hopeless. I feel not as hopeless without understanding.
Yeah.
Sort of following up on what Charles said, there's an expression, being one with the world, or one with the universe, or one with something outside ourselves. But in truth, we're part of that. It's not like we can't be one with something else, because we are the one.
Yeah.
And it's it's a different way. It's a different way of looking at things, and I think it's there's that dualism when you say one with something.
Yeah. More? Yeah. So that's really good. Sometimes it's like I talk about this stuff and I forget that basic Buddhist thing, which is like, I don't think it's identical. Of course, saying indigenous, that's all. But the Buddhist thing is, we're not exactly part of the family of life. It's all, it's all something. That's not even right. And then we're expressions of life, each one of us. But we experience our world as if we were separate, I have to do my own eating, for instance. And so we have to use this language. And then we have to explain that it's not quite on. Oh, so I have this incredible statement from a geneticist who is also a friend of mine. And I didn't read it, but I said, maybe now I want to read it in response to that. Because again, this is science. She insists on science and biology. Oh, there it is. So she says, all beings are the genetic material of the biosystem. That's all, this rest of the stuff is not necessary. We are genetic material. You take out a species, you impoverish the biosystem and becomes less resilient. And so this stuff that humans have been doing as our particular kind of animal has been weakening the biosystem. And we know it has. But it's like, it's like this is new. Lynn Lamoureux.
First, I want to say I really appreciate your talk and the topic. For me, and hopefully for a lot of other people, it's where my thoughts are going a lot. And so I'm glad that you bring it up. And I feel you've taken us on a very long walk and shown us a lot of different vistas and views. Two things. Number one, I love talking with people and trading stories and sharing experiences. And I'd like to say the times when I've asked the universe for something, I'm amazed it responds. I mean, it really happens. You're
Thank
not
you for saying
crazy
that.
and making
Right. Yeah.
It's happened to me too. Yeah. The other thing, this is harder and it's a question.
Okay.
What are those steps?
Oh, fortunately I wrote them down.
Yay! Because I was trying to remember
Yeah.
them. I thought it was a very important.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I liked what you said, and I was trying to repeat it to myself, and I couldn't. So.
Yes. Okay.
You don't mind.
So there were several first steps.
First step
So,
one. First
okay.
Step two.
So step one is, right.
Okay.
So, so like the pre-step is confession, which means admitting that something is going on.
Not hiding. Not
Right. Yeah.
not denial.
And then the first step here is getting back into relationship with the earth, which of course includes each other and ourselves. The second step, clarifying intention, and then I threw out those 5 questions, which I just love. Tried them on a sociology class once, it failed. If I do it again, I'll do it better though. Third step is trusting the way and trust that you are in the way, which is Dogen's word. And then I said, ask what to do. So asking was kind of in the second step, but trusting is the third step. It's like, don't stop yourself. I know the most about that. I know a lot about stopping myself. So, and that was it. It's like, ask what to do. Because what everybody needs to do is not the same thing. So,
Thank you.
I'm going to venture into some scary territory here because, first of all, I'm extremely ignorant about science. It's not my field, and I have read just enough to be dangerous about understanding climate and our role in it and so forth. And what I'm going to say is based on the book The Sixth Extinction.
Okay, I know of it. Haven't
Yes.
read it, but that's
Yes,
okay.
It's been some time since I've read it.
Yeah.
One of the things I am aware of is undeniably our actions matter and what we're doing
Mhm.
to the earth and our relation to it. However, it seems if you can take the human perspective away and entertain the idea that it's not about us, that there are forces so large at play here that we are absolutely inconsequential. And I know that sounds crazy, but the only reason I'm saying that is because there was a point when the world almost went extinct. All sentience went down to like 3% of living things went extinct, and this was millions of years ago. And everything that is alive now comes from that 3%. And we weren't in the picture at that point.
Mhm.
So what does this mean? I don't know. It just means that somehow I think always thinking from a human perspective is not necessarily the way to look at it. Does that?
It makes total sense. And then what do you do?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, the Kogi, for instance, they're like, well, it's because you removed the gold, which is not, it's not because you cut down the forests. It's because you did this like magical defiling act. And, so I have just finally stopped, given up all my near-term human extinction Facebook groups, of which I was in 3 or 4. Because I realized that I don't actually think, I don't feel hopeless. And they are talking about, okay, we are all going to be dead. Hopefully that 3% of life will come back and repopulate the earth, because that's what happens. So, yeah, and if you look at the bigger picture, well, what's happening, a house cleaning? If you look at it that way, that just something has happened and we're not important, we just happen to be the agents, or even not, how does that affect how you act? Okay, yeah. That's the thing. I find it's like when I think the words you said, it's like it helped me quiet down. Thinking that way helps me quiet down. And there is a peacefulness in going, well, I mean, clearly I'm not in control of everything, but I'm way too inclined to get angry at the people who are making things worse as fast as they can, and there are quite a few of them on the planet right now. And if I could have the spacious mind that said, well, they're not separate beings with evil intentions. They are something created by the universe or something created by the world to have such and such an impact. I wish I could remember to think that way, because if I look at it, oh, that is what I think. I don't think that they are individuals any more than I think I'm an individual. But, I operate as if I were an individual, and I operate as if they were individuals. And if I could stop operating that way, I think I would be more free to take steps. There's this question, what is it? So you're in a boat in a river, and a boat is heading right towards you. Maybe you're in a canoe and it's a motorboat and it's zooming towards you. And so you stand up and you start yelling, asking them to turn course. And then you look more closely and you see that nobody is in the motorboat. And so you stop yelling and you try to get your boat out of the way. I really thank you for bringing that in. Because that's just, how do we get our boat out of the way? Well, what's our boat, you know? We'd like there to be food and water. We would like for the whole planet not to burn up in fires the way Australia is currently burning. How do we get our boat out of the way? Oh.
Should we leave it at that?
I think that's a great stopping place.
So one of the things that we can do is
Yes.
do the vows.
Yes.
So we're going to do the Bodhisattva vows. I'm going to ring the bell and then we'll do them out. Beings are numberless. I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to awaken them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable.